met an exited founder recently who made his millions by making music for dogs.
I would love to know who his customers were.
Like the dogs.
No, but I mean,
wow.
It's not exactly a riddle.
Yeah. I had to submit a lot of stuff about my background and my family.
Is it sort of like going for a military job?
I don't know because I've never done that, but I could assume.
He looks like Albert Einstein a bit, doesn't he? He's quite an erratic. He's got that big
eccentric,
curly,
like
eccentric's the word, sorry.
Yeah.
Erratic. But I love the way that you know people are using AI because they've not got spelling mistakes. Come on, David. I know you struggle with sincerely. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to episode 12 of the Mergers podcast. After a long summer, we're now firmly back in it. Weekly episodes. Really excited for today's episode. With me, as ever, we have the man who is famous from Calgary to Copenhagen. Oh, not quite Copenhagen, actually. Sorry.
Unfortunately not, but we had some extra time in Greece, so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
The acoustics in here are actually very good. I'm actually quite impressed with that.
Yes, it's not too bad. Do you want to explain just very quickly why not Copenhagen, or is that bad for the reputation?
Maybe we'll get back to that later in the episode.
Yeah, well, stay tuned. And do you want to introduce our guest today, Eleanor, who is very much the star of the show?
Yeah, today we have Eleanor Kaye. She is the person that runs the new Venture program, which I'm a part of their fellowship. Basically, it's just a boot camp for people that are in VC and looking to get into VC. Partnership between Local Globe, great seed investor here in Europe, and LBS, London Business School. But I guess it would also be great to maybe have Eleanor give herself a bit of an intro as well.
Wow, you did a really good job. I need you to just follow me around and introduce me to people. Is that okay?
Yeah. Like they have the scroll bearers.
Yeah.
And they're just like introducing.
It's like,
with a trumpet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, great. Look, that was a lovely intro, actually. Yeah, so I'm the managing director of Newton Venture Program. I've been here about 4 years. As you mentioned, we are a joint venture of Local Globe VC, and that's actually where we are today. We're in their podcast studio, and it's great because I get to be totally embedded in the VC world, coming to work here. Today's a portfolio day. They've got loads of really cool founders in. It's one of the things that I love most about working with Local Globe is that access to really smart people. And of course, London Business School. Now, the way it all came about was that they wanted to create a training program that not only upskilled and addressed the training gap in venture capital that's currently there, but also address the lack of diversity in venture capital currently. So that's why we exist. We've been running, like I said, for 4 years and have trained over 2,000 people. The pipeline is not a problem. We've been collecting the data on it, and we're 50% people identify as female or male, and also we are, I think, 75% global majority heritage. So I think we're proving that it's not just people with lack of interest of wanting to work in venture capital, but also unable to progress or break into venture capital is part of the problem, and we're trying to address that by doing the training and programs that we do.
Yeah. I guess before we dig into the venture capital side of things, there's also something's very special. One, about how Local Globe operates as a fund, but then also about the location where it's offices here is
Somerstown. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes. So Saul and Robin Klein, who set up Local Globe, they father and son duo, and they wanted to build a firm that was sustainable, thinking the long-term game, not only in the investments they make, but also thinking about the impact they make on their local neighborhood. And so they chose specifically to be in this office where we are right now in Somerstown, and they support through like their fees the local neighborhood through their foundation Phoenix Court Works. And I see it, live it and breathe it. You know, I go to the local coffee shop, they're known here, like the local garden round the corner that's supplying like the food banks, like they are so, and the schools as well. Like Local Globe are known in this neighborhood and support the initiatives around here, and it's absolutely fantastic to see it living and breathing. And I think it's the indicative of a new way of thinking about VC firms and the impact that they can have.
Venture for the people.
Venture for the people. I like that. Yeah.
And what inspired you to sort of take on the mission to democratize access?
Yeah, it's something that I'm quite passionate about. So I grew up in a tiny little village in Berkshire.
Where is that?
Exactly, West. And I can get really granular, but basically it was a tiny village. You were told growing up, like, hey, you could be a shopkeeper or a teacher, and
very small village.
Yeah, really small. Everyone knew each other, and it wasn't until my dad and my mum split up and my dad moved away that when I started visiting him, he moved to Montreal first, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And then he moved to London, and I was exposed to this world of like, wow, there are people out there who believe different things, have different experiences and backgrounds, and are doing really cool things. And that was my first foray into sort of like understanding about the media world. And that's how I ended up feeling really passionate about wanting to create production that kind of told people about the real world. And when you do these school projects, I did a uni project about the homelessness in Northampton. And, it's always it's been inspiring for me to see paths that people can potentially take just by access to opportunity. And as we know, that's not equally shared. Unless people can see other people in roles or doing different things, they're never going to know that's even possible. And so I'm so grateful for that exposure to London. And that's kind of where I ended up going down this sort of media, TV, film, music path.
And out of interest, because I think it's become, certainly so I'm at like a big bank, and there's definitely so many programs now to help people progress, especially from underrepresented backgrounds. But that obviously wasn't always the case. And even in my career, I've seen it go from not really being a thing to definitely becoming much more of a focus. But how tough was it to get that progress, and how many obstacles were sort of put in your way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think I started, so you'll laugh at this. So I used to work at a local radio station when digital first came out, called Swindon FM, which my dad kindly called it Quiet FM, because I think I had about 10 listeners, and I used to make up that people were calling me for song requests, and but you just had to persevere, and I sort of subsidized working for free there at a pub until sort of 11 p.m. at night, just so I can afford the petrol so I could drive there. And wow. I think there's like an element of like the work ethic that I got from my dad, of like perseverance and grit, like just made me sort of really push through and go, right, well, if I want to do this, I'm going to have to do this to compensate. And so I worked throughout my whole education to be able to subsidize the learning and like being able to do things. And I was quite careful with money. I think I was very careful not to get myself in a lot of debt. And so I would I'd just go without, it's like, that's fine. I'm just not going to go out, and I just get there. And I think, don't get me wrong, because my dad was in London, there was this access to opportunity that all of a sudden came up. And when I got a bit of work experience as a runner, and you might not know what a runner is, but in the media world, when everything was filmed on reel or like proper big reels, I'd be running around Soho with a map that was printed out, because there were no phones, trying to find these production studios. And it was a time before camera phones. There were famous people out on the streets. It was really cool. It was what Soho was like kind of built on, was this world of media and film and TV, and it wasn't really celebrities. These were just actors, but they were just hanging out on the streets, and it was just this vibe, and that's what I wanted to be in. I wanted to be in that world of like excitement and just it was so compelling to me, and I knew that was where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in London, and so it was media studies, which I chose to do at Northampton Uni, and I loved it. And then I got into working in comedy. Actually, my first foray was in music, so you can imagine my early 20s. I'm going to like gigs every night and like having like the best time ever. Being paid basically in CDs because there was no money in it. They were like, hey, don't worry, we can't pay you very much, but like, here's a bunch of CDs in payment, and free T-shirts. But it was cool. Like I was hanging out, with bands that were up and coming, and like it was a really cool vibe. And I think working in media, you get really used to working with really big personalities and working at pace. And what I didn't know is that I was basically being, I guess, getting ready to work in startup world. Like you've got to work super quick. You can't just say no. And especially in production, it's like, get stuff done, get it done now and do it well, because you're working with difficult stakeholders, i.e. comedians or artists, creatives. Yeah. Love it. And I think that's how I just built up like quite a high tolerance and resilience to like getting stuff done and doing it well.
Yep.
So to tie this to Newton, because you said two interesting things, that you sort of grew up in this kind of slightly more scarcity mindset environment where you're careful with money, and then now you're saying you had this training with working in media. Is that part of the work you do at Newton, is helping people understand perhaps how some of their backgrounds and behavioural biases like influence their decision making, how they act, and sort of retraining them?
Yeah, I think just to introduce Newton a little bit more, we have like 3 different types of training programs. The one which is the fellowship, which Ken's on, which is for people who are already in this space and they're potentially looking to like expand their network and learn the more sort of technical elements and basically develop themselves as people and move forward with an idea from like maybe conception to like deliverables. So it's far more sort of exec education in its approach. And then we have the fundamentals program, which is online, and that's for anyone who can join around the world, and they can learn about the life cycle of venture capital. So they might be an analyst in a VC fund, or they might be someone who's working in a bank, and we have had people from Barclays come along and do our program, and they might just want to understand the VC world, but they don't need to have that experience. It's like, okay, I just want to understand how it works. What skills do I need to work through that? And then we also, because of what exactly you said, is like access to opportunity, is we launched our free introduction to venture capital program earlier on this year, and it just exploded. Of course, anything that's free, right? But all of a sudden, like access to learning from, a high quality program about a concept. And in fact, we ran a report last year, which was like how many people in the UK are familiar, not even understand, familiar with the term venture capital. And it's like 9%, and primarily condensed in London, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So how can you even understand a concept if you don't know what you're looking for? And to your point, like I think this sort of, I come from a line of teachers, so I think that's where like this sort of wanting to give information comes from, is just from meeting lots of really interesting people in tech, in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and learning from them. Like all of my knowledge comes from speaking to people, and I try and bring the nuance and the reality of working in venture capital to our learners, because it potentially could seem a very lucrative, exciting career choice, and I feel very responsible to make sure that it's the reality. And understanding when you're talking about skills that you need, we break those down as part of our sort of intro to VC program, and we talk about like how potentially the skills you've learned or got, and especially those who've got a STEM background and they've done a lot of like analytics, that is brilliant. You're very like detail orientated. You can use that to do due diligence. You can do that to really understand, or people who've worked in startups who can then transferably, understand the growth of a firm that's coming up and like understand those milestones they want to get to. And people who have built empathy through working with founders as an accelerator, or even just is a decent person. Like categorically, like you got to understand, and this, you're working with founders who are trying to build their dream. What happens if you turn around and you're just like, good luck with that, mate?
Yeah, I was talking with someone today. It's like, this is actually another VC who was in Copenhagen, so I was supposed to meet. But they were like, there's a 50-50 chance that the VC you meet will be either a dick or like someone that will be mildly interesting to speak to. Because I was speaking with another founder, and he's like, the issue with VCs is that they all want to be rock stars, and obviously the rock star is the founder. That's the show, right? And like as an investor, the best person we could be is probably like the person that's taking the instruments from the bus to the venue, right? And just supporting them in that way. Well, not in that way, but in a similar type of fashion. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting people in the space for sure.
What do you think of the rock star VC mentality? Because I know a lot of VCs now. For someone who's not an investor, my network in the VC landscape is quite vast now, and I think there's, well, maybe you tell me, but like, what do you think of this rockstar VC mentality?
I mean, listen, if you have good deals on your belt, you have good deals under your belt, right? That speaks for itself. But I think for a lot of folks, if we were in that zero interest rate period where everything went up, sure. I mean, like everyone's portfolio was a great picker, right? I think now people are having like a bit of a sobriety check on that in that sense. Yeah, there's another point I was going to make.
You're not a good VC just because you're on the right side of rates going to zero in QE.
You'd be surprised. A lot of people have raised off of those markups.
Okay.
What do you think? But then there's also now like the TripAdvisor of VCs. Right. So someone's created it. I don't know whether I'm allowed to name drop on here what that is.
Go for it.
Yeah, we can always blur it out.
So there's Landscape VC, which is where people can like review investors. And if you ever, like, I'm not a member, but I have seen them pop up, like, what people are saying about investors. It's about communication. Like, are they ghosting them if they have a first meet, like, and they get back to them in good time? Even if they don't invest, they're getting 5 stars by just being decent people and, like talking them, potentially giving feedback. Not everyone can give feedback, and I understand that, but just being a decent person, if you're going to have that conversation with a founder about something that they are so passionate about building, just have the decency to not ghost.
But we've spoken about this before. It's like, at least me growing up, I was like, to work at a bank, or I did,
and you fulfilled your dream.
Yeah. Thank God. No, but like I just, so much of my career has been me reminding myself that I am not like a rocket scientist. I just need to get back to people in good time. Yep. I need to follow up when I say I'm going to follow up. I need to meet people with empathy rather than like, just being like, oh, sorry, there's been a family bereavement. I can't make the meeting.
Yep.
Just be kind. Yeah, I understand. Can we help? Don't worry, like whatever we're trying to do, offshore bond's going to be there tomorrow. Like, but so many people just, I don't know. Sorry.
It's funny you mentioned, I mean, some of my shortest conversations where I'm going to leave this conversation have been with VCs. And there was one notably bad one I had, and I literally went on Landscape to see what their reviews were that founders gave them, and it was exactly the same experience I had. And like, I wasn't even looking for money. I was there to ask them, hey, we're doing this. Do you want to be a part of it? And their mindset was, and they were not, and like, I'm not going to name them because they're not a tier 1 VC. They're not even like a tier, like brand name VC. So I'm just like,
you're squashing them right now by just get right. They're like tier 10.
No, but it was like, they're like, oh, we don't see the point in getting involved from a marketing perspective. We can have access to it on the back end. I'm like, well, you definitely won't with that mindset. But like, I was like, but I think we've covered it, and like, thanks for your time. And I just left it at that. And like, I went on Landscape, and man, they were getting torn apart for their communication, poor communication.
I think good tolerance. Like, most people who I have meetings with, if they're late or they completely don't turn up, most of the time they've just had a bad day and something's happened. So I think there's like an element of tolerance that you have to like bring in. But I also think compassion and empathy are so, like, it's amazing. Like, if I need it, I've got people who, and my network is now pretty awesome, and I've got people I could reach out to, but not just on a business perspective, but as a personal perspective, to ask for advice and support. And I think that's through building strong relationships and not just seeing everything as a transaction. Mm-hmm. And I see that happening with people I meet in VC, especially people who come through our programs. And we use blind hiring, so we don't actually know anything about the person before they come through, apart from what they divulge through their answers. So we don't see their name, their background, their experience. And we get really nice people on the program. It builds a really nice feeling, like everyone's really supportive and wanting to help. And that might be down to the questions we ask. And you know, it's like, how are you going to contribute to making the venture capital ecosystem better? Yeah. If you put that in someone's head and you're like, okay, this is why you're coming on this program, is because you actually care about making this better. We don't want to have more VCs coming out of our program who don't treat people with respect.
Yeah. Not good ecosystem players.
No.
To be fair, to plug our own group here, I mean, I met Ken through networking. We've become friends. Yeah. Hector, who's coming on next week, I was actually just on holiday with him. Like it's weird how, I mean, that's probably a sign of me being quite young, but it's weird that you can make some pretty good friends in the industry. And
yeah. That's what it's about. I mean, like Hector, Roy, myself, we went to Paris to see the Olympics randomly. Just like, and that's just what it becomes, right? Because you never like, and that's the thing about, you talk about people being transactional. They'll probably look for some value they can get very early on. In reality, you know, something might come of it if you're not looking for, you don't have to look for something, but you can come to something like, you know, years down the line. When in reality, it's just like, but you've made a good friend out of it, you know.
But interesting what you said about being younger. Like, I don't obviously know your age, but I do think the world I grew up in of work, you were in the office all the time and you were building really strong connections because you were in the office and you were socializing with the people you were working with. Post-COVID, that's just not the case. Like, we work, like Newton, we work hybrid, you know, twice a week. We come into the office and we work here, but there's a real shift in, like, how do you build strong connections and how do you build quality relationships when you're coming into the office twice a week, or you're maybe not with your, I don't know what Barclays are doing, but
yeah, hybrid as well.
Yeah.
It's a good question. And I do think for people joining new firms like Barclays, if you're only in twice a week, it is probably tougher. But I also think in some sense it gives you perhaps more of a chance if you're quite serious about your job and you're not in that FaceTime culture of, I'm not actually working, but I'm going to stay till 7:30, so I look like I am. Then you can go to, we were at a private equity drinks yesterday and could do that on a Tuesday, but I don't know if in my old firm, because you had a FaceTime culture to some degree where, you know, you were judged on, if you left at 5 to go to a networking drinks, it was kind of like, well, are you leaving, or are you leaving at 5 o'clock because so I think there's swings and roundabouts.
I think just on the presenteeism thing, if it's a really big bugbear of mine. I am very output focused with my team. And if someone needs to go to a doctor's appointment or like whatever, just go. Like, I don't want you to be sat there worrying about something that's going on for you and like you're trying to fit it around work. I'm very, very much output focused, and I've got people on my team who work really odd hours because that's what works for them. You know, they're working till 3 a.m. and I'm like, I've seen them being on a spreadsheet. That's not because I've told them to.
Yeah.
It's just that they work better waking up later and starting work later and working till 3 a.m. And, you know, when I was at Palantir before here, I was, that's how all our software engineers worked.
Yeah, they're a different breed.
They are a different breed, and they're wonderful. And I was very privy to working with some exceptionally smart people there, and I think that's sort of where I've got this tolerance from for understanding different ways of working and to be more output focused rather than, because somebody could fix something and I think about my own experience, like something that might have taken me like a week of due diligence to think over, now I can, with my gut and my experience, make a decision in half an hour.
Yeah.
And I have to be more tolerant that people work in different fashions and to work that in. But that's really tough as a company scaling and growing, because somebody might not like using a direct messaging tool. Somebody really, really values like a project management system. Well, how do you create cohesive working when everyone's working in such different ways, but you know you have happier employees if everyone's working in a way that works for them?
And what do you think about the recent trend to return to office? Because that is seemingly think it's Amazon's return to office. Some of the banks have. I know rumours at Barclays are that they might add another day. Or
I don't think it, like, personally, I wouldn't do that for Newton. I don't think it's, and that is because it positively benefits me. I have 2 young children. I really value being able to see them in the evening, and my commute home would mean that I wouldn't see them. Right. And we used to be out the door, my husband and I, at 7:30, dropping off the kids, like, as the nursery opened, just so we could get into the office and spend the whole day there, just so we could leave and pick up our kids just as nursery was shutting. Oh. And neither of us want to go back to that. And I like being able to, like, you know, if I'm working from home, I might see my children at 3:00, or like I might go to the gym, you know, during my lunch break. And it doesn't matter if I'm sat there and like just finished a workout, like it doesn't matter. But I think they're pushing away, and it primarily affects women because we take the brunt of like home admin, childcare. Yeah. And if you start pushing people back to work, you know, women in particular are very desperate for flexible working. And, you know, I'm speaking from my own personal view, and I'm sure there's lots of dads out there, but parents, carers, anyone who's like got responsibilities outside of work, flexible working has been the best. Yeah. I think it's going to negatively impact parents, carers, people who have like a multitude of things they're working on. Like I volunteer at a local school as a chair of governors. You know, people are balancing different things, and you know, they might have a passion project or someone else they're helping on the side, and you know, that stops them from developing and growing as people if you monitor them, and it goes back to the presenteeism aspect.
So do you think there's a natural balancing between that cohesiveness of being in the office and the sort of fulfillment and work-life balance at work from home, or do you think, and Newton, how do you try and get the best of both worlds?
So I think there's a management issue.
Okay.
I think there's got to be very clear all company alignment on what your goals are as a business, and making sure that everyone's bought in, which is hard. It means you've got to address the company values, the culture. Everyone is driving towards the same goal, and you've then got to ensure that you are managing in a way that everyone's very clear about what their responsibilities and tasks are. And I think if there's a like training to be done or growth, like you've got to have those touch points. I think some remote companies work really well. It's all remote, and that works really well for people. But if you're like me, you like that sort of human connection, then in real life, then finding a balance that works for you. But you know, we're a small business. We can be sort of democratic in our approach. But I think if you embed that from the start, and then if you do scale, then you're going to see. But you've got to get that company alignment. You've got to get.
I guess, how do you view like on that note, to like building culture and team, right? Because you could have someone that could probably be a really good executor and operator, but within a certain culture they might not fit, and that kind of detracts from everyone else's work in a bit. So how do you look at it in terms of team building and like developing culture alongside that?
It's a really good question. So I think we try and apply the same sort of approach as we do with our cohorts, and we hire on values. And normally the values are the ones that create the alignment. So when we do interview questions, we push them back to our values. And one of our values is around like trusting the team to get the job done. So someone who's able to be like work autonomously, but as a team player, they're honest, they're transparent about their work. Like it doesn't help anyone for us to have someone on the team who's hiding their work or, you know, being protective over it. We all need to work forward. So my personal approach is that we hire on the values that we've aligned as a team, what works for our business. We're a mission-driven, not-for-profit. Right. You know, if someone's not keen about like democratizing the face of venture capital and making it like more accessible and driving towards like removing the status quo, that's not going to work. And that's one of our values, you know, not accepting the status quo. So I think if you have 3 or 4 really strong values that you hire against, and then use those values to work into all of your goals, I think you can't go wrong, really. But yeah, building culture is tough, I think.
And do you think all of this sort of ties into, I suppose, either like the 4th Industrial Revolution or the 4th Turning, if you've read the book, but sort of period of change where we're navigating sort of AI, work from home, culture, I would say values in a world where sort of businesses have gone from strictly for profit to for stakeholders generally. And so perhaps there's never been a better time to be a smaller, more nimble organization where you can set these things out, like you say, from the start, rather than be a 20,000 firm organization trying to introduce the idea of, stakeholder management sort of at a later stage.
I think I'll draw upon like my experience at Palantir Tech, which I was there for 6 years. I joined then as the 100th person in Europe, and I was welcoming 12 people a week at one point across multiple offices. And like I remember being handed my first day like a postcard that said like, "Can I swear?"
Yeah.
And don't be an asshole. Like that was like literally the company mantra. It was like, don't be an asshole.
You'd be surprised how many people don't take that advice.
True. I took it very, very, very seriously. And you were handed a track jacket, and it had Palantir on it. I've still got my original track jacket. I've got loads of old stuff, but and it was very much written. It was like, when you put this on, like you are representing us, and you have to believe in what the mission is and what the culture is. And here's a selection of books. We want you to have these. This is your onboarding plan. Like, it was very clear from the start that you had to be fully engaged with what they were building and what they were doing. And as time went on, it was very startup at the beginning, very sort of like, I remember just being like, "Hey, right, you need to get to Paris tomorrow. We're closing like one office. We're opening another. Can you go and fit it out? No, you haven't got any help. No, you can just do it." And I'm literally walking around Paris buying like Macs from stores and like setting up offices. And it was so hands-on. And it was like, right, we've got people coming like in 2 days to start working there because we just hired them. And it was just get stuff done mentality. And then over the 6 years I was there, it changed and shifted so much. Like just the more corporate approach to things, like it lost that, in my opinion, lost the thing that made it really special and really like cool about like, hey, if you find a problem, fix it.
Yeah.
That was what it was. It was like, it didn't matter what it was, if it was in your area or like whatever, if something's not working, you just fix it. You didn't ask somebody to fix it. And that was like so empowering. And then as things have changed and shifted, especially pre-COVID, and then when I left during COVID times, like in September 21, just after direct listing, I was like, this isn't the company that I really loved anymore. And I think it's really hard to maintain that level of really close culture. And maybe you can talk about Barclays culture.
Certainly not. Don't want to get fired.
But like it's hard to maintain at a level that you're like growing at a capacity, and all of a sudden you've got shareholders, external shareholders, and people you have to be accountable to externally, and showing profit. And I think there's always going to be this sort of shift, and with the like use of AI, and look, this is I'm so bored of it, but it's
sorry, we don't have to. She asked me a bloody good question, Rory.
No, it's fine. It's just that, like, every new company that comes out thinks it's an AI company, and it's not an AI company. It's an HR tech, and they happen to use AI on the side. Like, it's like I think like AI is you can't ignore it, and it's great. But God, please don't use it to write your emails.
We're very much in the
they want another zero
crypto
on their price to sales.
Right, exactly.
We're very much in that crypto blockchain era of like with AI right now, like peak hype.
But don't you think it's lost like that, like who people are behind? Like you see it, and you see the way newsletters are written. You see the way, like any content's written. Even the way, even some people email me, and I'm like, you didn't write that, and I know it's getting better, but the reality is like I just be yourself, being authentic and being true. So what if you've got a spelling mistake in your email? I don't care. Like, you could use Grammarly for that, I guess. But like, I just find the robotic nature of AI like so difficult to get past or look, especially in sort of what I'm experiencing.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but I love the way that you know people are using AI because they've not got spelling mistakes. Come on, David. I know you struggle with sincerely. Who are you kidding here? I before E, you didn't learn that at school.
Yeah. But I just don't care. Like, I don't care if you're authentic as a person. That's what I love about meeting new people. That is what venture capitalists want in a founder.
Yeah.
They don't want a founder who's got the perfectly written like pitch deck. I've seen people invest in like companies which pitch decks were literally, they could have been done on paint.
You know what's funny? It's funny you mentioned that because I was speaking when I was on a panel in Calgary with 500 Global. We were talking, and one of the guys was like, "Oh,
mic drop."
one of the they were like,
when he actually remembered to take his passport.
Nice circle back.
Yeah. I think it's about time to circle back on that one. So like he's like, they asked, would you invest in the pitch deck that had like some errors? And I'm just like, I was like, yeah, why not? Well, I mean, what's the real issue there, right? And the other person said they wouldn't, and I was just like, fair enough. I mean, I'm not sure how true that is, because
if the idea's good and the founding team's good, like
if Sam Altman said, hey, here's my idea.
Yeah.
And it's like, he spelled the word wrong, you're not going to invest in it. Or like the multi-exited founder or something like that. I mean, I've seen...
You hear ideas being invested in on like back of paper, like paper napkins. Oh, yeah. Like, I think people... And actually, I see this quite a lot in initiatives that are supporting, especially female founders. So much is put into creating this perfect pitch deck.
Yeah.
And they don't understand that a typical investor spends 9 seconds looking at a pitch deck.
Oh yeah,
they're looking at the founding team, they're looking at the problem and how they're going to solve it. And like, quite frankly, the more effort we make in like helping people fail and not really, like, we want people to come up with problems, like solutions to huge problems. That's what we want. We don't want a perfectly like put together pitch deck that's got nice patterns on it. Like, that's not what's going to get funding.
And that's what I tell people, like founders all the time, is like, you need to be able to tell me what you do or what the problem is in 2 or 3 sentences. It can't be more than that, because I'm not reading it. Someone sent me a deck that was like 54 pages, and I said, why is it this long? I'm not reading it. He's like, oh, but it'll be like, it's really worth the read. I'm like, I'm not reading it. And like,
and that comes down to education as well, right? Like, it's like, how can we trickle down the education and the training to allow everyone to succeed? And unfortunately, because it is so close, like most founders, and if you've got founders listening, don't appreciate what VCs are looking for, or even if VC is the right form of capital for them. We see a lot of people thinking that they have to go through this funding stage of like, right, it's going to go to my friends and family first, and then I'm going to go to an angel round, and then I have to go to VC. You don't have to go to VC funding. VC funding is not for everyone.
Yep.
And this, again, is an educational issue.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I tell folks, like, I think what's really interesting, there's a lot of folks that have lifestyle businesses but don't realize it and try to go for VC funding. And I'm just like, why you're making money now? What's the issue?
Bootstrap it.
You have like a positive EBITDA margin. Just live, I guess.
Yeah.
Can I ask from a non-VC?
You may.
From a Gaz and I level of understanding. So obviously VCs, right? You might take a 1 to 5% stake in a company, gets diluted. So you need that company to scale to 50, 100 million in revenue. But what you're saying is companies come to you, they're making 2 million in revenue. They could scale to 5, maybe 10 million in revenue. And you're just saying, why are you overcomplicating it? Just keep the team small, keep the money, pay yourself dividends. You don't need to become the next Square or Block or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
You can just...
I met an exited founder recently who made his millions by making music for dogs. And he exited the business, and that was it. And he didn't get any external funding, and that was just like...
I would love to know who his customers were.
Like the dogs.
No, but I mean...
Wow.
It's not
So
exactly
I explained it, yeah. I told you what it did in like 1 second.
But just like... I guess people love their... I mean, I've had dogs. You love your pets. You want them to have
people
the
who
best.
don't want to be left at home with their dogs, and they get left at home and they want music to be played for the dog.
I was going to say, did you guys read about it was either in COVID or like Y2K, whatever, the guy that sold...
Two very different periods.
Yeah, I can't remember. But he sold like Armageddon insurance. So people in America were paying him like $100 because
Brilliant.
after the world ended, he would take care of their pets. Do you know about this?
That's brilliant.
That's definitely Y2K. That has to be Y2K.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, I don't know if he got done for fraud, but I remember he made like $300,000.
Wow.
Well, I mean, if you don't have to pay out the policy, how's it fraud?
Yeah. I mean, it's ethically dubious.
Yeah, but I guess to turn the business, I mean, like, there's dilution on all fronts. I mean, you want to make sure that founders incentivized to have like, X amount of the business to continue growing it. But, you can have very large very large exits where the founder would come in with less than if you were doing like a few mil and you owned everything and you sold the business. I've seen that a couple times. Also, you need to be very aware of your preference stacks, and like we had legals with Newton, so that was very informative as well. But I mean, you really have to go for the moonshot when you're taking VC money, because you can end up with years of work and nothing to show for it, at least monetarily.
Can I change course? I want to go a bit on your career history.
Northampton was a very small university, which felt like home. I think that's why it felt good to go there.
Okay.
But yeah, so I did that.
And then, but ended up at Money Supermarket, few other places. And I'm really interested in how, obviously, explain the story. But for those that don't know, Palantir is probably what, and we spoke about it a bit, is one of the more controversial sort of big data AI kind of. How do you go from media to one of the most sort of secretive, but also at this point really well known like AI data companies in the world?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I call it a career lattice. So I think that's actually why I probably enjoy meeting lots of people from different areas, because I've just worked across like multiple different industries, I guess. Like I mentioned earlier on, like the media part of me was because I was like inspired by working in Soho when I was 14 for a week. Like it was just felt like the place that felt like home, and it was extremely fast paced and working with really interesting people. And then it just didn't pay very well. There's only so many CDs I could have and free T-shirts, and so I was headhunted for a role at Money Supermarket, and it was really nice. They were very corporate, and like it was a nice place to work. But it was my first time working in a place where like you just had a job description and you just did your job.
Okay, so I'm not sure what is Money Supermarket.
So it's an online
Really?
price comparison website for home insurance or pet insurance or like car insurance. It's
Are
all
those
on.
the ones that have the pets and like that's animals that do their ads? Or
That's their competitor.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair
but
enough.
like and do you know what? It was fun. But I worked myself out of the job. And I couldn't sit there any longer. And I like said, look, I could do this. I can like work across multiple sites. I can like streamline all your processes. At the moment, you're on multiple different sites, and I can work across all this. But it just like they just weren't used to people, or it felt like pushing beyond what was in the JD.
Right.
And at that point, Palantir reached out, and I think, so interestingly, while I was in media, I also volunteered as a Met Police constable. My sister always laughs. She says, you have so many stories because you've done so many different things. So I was already cleared and like had been DBS checked and was very sort of squeaky clean, I guess. And
I was going to, when you go to Palantir, they must really drill down into...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to submit a lot of stuff about my background and my family.
Is it sort of like going for a military job?
I don't know because I've never done that, but I could assume it's one of the things I haven't done.
Humbled.
But yeah, I had 13 interviews to get the job there.
Wow.
The last one was with one of the founders. I remember I waited. It was meant to be at like 7 p.m. and I think it ended up being at like 11:30 at night. I was waiting, and it was like a 10-minute call in the end. And of course, you're so stressed. You're told this is like the last, the big boss. You're getting to the end of your like game, and you've got to get the big boss, and you're already really nervous. And it's like 11:45 at night, and you're just like, what? But anyway, I passed all the interviews, and I think the founders stopped interviewing everybody at that point. Just after they were like, well, we've peaked. So
I need that level of confidence in my life.
I'm completely joking because I honestly it was a baptism of fire. My first day, I inherited something like 1,000 Jira tickets, and like,
is that like a IT? It's like,
yeah,
like a problem ticket.
Yeah, and I was like, what on earth have I done? And then they were like, yeah, can you fly? I think I had to go to Copenhagen like the next week, and
keeps coming back.
Yeah, it does. I've remembered my passport, and but no,
thank you for getting a shot in on him.
Yeah.
I felt really sort of ambushed in the corner here, just me and the snake plant, just ducking and covering on my own podcast.
Yeah, for anyone listening and not watching the video, we have a little bit of decor in the podcast room,
surrounding one plant,
surrounding one fern.
Yeah. But yeah, so I that was really really intense. Like, hey, welcome to this company. Not only have you got to fix all this, but you've also got to be like, I think one of the first meetings I had with one of the senior leaders, he just said, your career is not, Palantir is not going to be a straight line. You are going to go all over the place and work in loads of different areas of the business. In fact, we really want you to do that. And I did, and I was in EU Ops for a while, and then I was across getting us ready for direct listing and doing some finance work and unearthed some stuff. And then went into BD, business development, and working on the tendering team with UK Gov. And it was really, really cool, having that exposure. But I think my favorite thing about working at a company like that was the people. And I know I talked a little bit about the culture, but the people, when you're working with very, very smart people, and these are people that I would never have brushed shoulders with, growing up. I went to nice University of Northampton. These are all Oxbridge graduates who have come straight from there to going straight to Palantir, and they are so smart. And you learn, well, me personally, I learn really well from meeting really smart people and learning from them, and being questioned and challenged on my ways of working. And it helped me work with really different people from all types of backgrounds. I think Karp said recently, he said, we're the best because we employ the best immigrants. He really believes in that diversity of thought and background and experience. I mean, they're smart people, but I think that kind of, he and the same as Newton, we really believe in that diversity of thought in the room.
But Karp embodies that because he did his PhD in Germany, didn't he?
He's German, I think.
Oh, he is German.
Yeah.
And now in a US-based company, so he knows.
Yeah, and he's a super interesting. I've met him a couple of times. He used to just walk around the office and ask really strange questions. And I just remember thinking, I did his Tai Chi classes a couple of times as well because he's really into Tai Chi.
Good buffalo.
He looks like Albert Einstein a bit, doesn't he? He's quite an erratic. He's got that big
eccentric,
curly,
yeah.
Eccentric's the word, sorry.
Yeah.
Erratic. Please don't hack my phone.
I think working for somebody who's just got such high drive and motivation it is inspiring. It's hard not to be caught up in the culture. And I think it took me a while. It was like having a terrible breakup, because it was during COVID and I left and then it was gone and you were just cut off. And I felt bereft, because everything I'd done over the last 6 years previous was around this. They even had their own sort of language. Everything had code words. Like, it was like you just spoke a different language to people outside of Palantir. And I think you just become so embedded in that. It's quite hard to move on. And it took me a while to sort of get my feet in normal land, I think.
I know what you mean. The last company I worked for had high growth. I was like employee 71, and by the time of it, 281 mil when I was there, and then almost quadrupled the team size in like a year. So it's just like, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, you're just in a different world altogether.
Yeah. And I think you can take away, I think looking back, like, I took loads from that. I think I took loads from the experience, like, I think it's solidified in me, like, how I like to work and what really drives change and impact. And I think that's why I quite like what we do here, because it's a very small dynamic team and we can just create and iterate very quickly on feedback. And I think I want to continue working in that form. I'm not very good with the bureaucracy that comes with, like, going through multiple layers of approvals, or, you know, it just doesn't fly. It's like, let's get something out. It's like, might be 8% good and then 80% good, not 8% good. That would be bad. And
it's not ready.
Yeah. And then let's see what happens. And that's how you change and move quickly.
I was just going to say, out of interest, when you went there, was it a real shock to see? Because obviously we've now been slightly numb to the impact of AI in our lives. But when you went to Palantir before AI sort of became famous, was it a real sort of shock to be able to see what they could do?
It was like looking into the future. Yeah. You know, they were building out, I can't remember the exact term, but you could look 10 years into the future and, like, see what you needed to do X for such and such a business. Or you could, like, predict within a couple of seconds if something went down, like how to reroute it that costs, like, the least amount of money for the business. Or, like, even, I'm being very careful about who I'm talking about, but they had, like, massive commercial contracts with huge, like, transport systems, and, like, it was mind-blowing, like, absolutely mind-blowing, how quickly they could run different pathways and different, like, programs just to answer, like, questions that they didn't even know they needed to ask. Wow. And like, that was just brilliant. And in fact, because I worked on the ops side of things, I set up a sort of technical learning session, the Ask a Stupid Question learning session for everyone who wasn't in the sort of engineering land. And we used to bring in engineers from different teams to come and teach. Again, this teaching open to access. Like, how can we make sure that everyone is, like, on board with what we're building, what we're doing? Because you don't always get the opportunity. You're told, oh, we're delivering this new product, or this is this iteration, but what does that mean? And so I set up these, and it started off with just, like, the recruiting and admin team, and then it was all of a sudden, like, the people, everyone from ops, and, like, it was like 30 of us gathered to learn from these engineers about what we were building, because I really believed, like, the more knowledge people have, or access to knowledge, and I know that people who were in those teams went on to join the more technical areas of the business because they got exposed to that.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, being in that high-paced environment, scaling up different types of teams and making sure everyone's on the same level as in terms of education about the business parts of that. What have you taken from that into, I guess, building out Newton? Because obviously it's kind of similar. It's a VC program for people in venture capital, but also those in the ecosystem who might not know all the way about it. So how do you educating everyone on the same level and then raising everyone together?
That's a really, I mean, you've experienced this. So and I mentioned around the importance of diversity of thought, because we really value people's opinions, whether they're running accelerators in South Africa, whether they're like a tech transfer officer or an exited founder. Like this exposure to not just being in a bubble and being an exclusive VC learning program, we believe that actually bringing people together from a variety of different backgrounds from the ecosystem will make everyone more powerful, because there's an element of like, right, not everyone's going to have had exposure or access to negotiating a deal, like, or like, I don't know, like deploying the capital themselves, because they might have to go through a variety of different processes to get the go ahead, or VC firms work in very different ways and they have very different setups, and you've got ones that are like sort of a 3-person GP fund, or you've got large firm with like their own ways of doing things. So I think we never know when people come into the room what level they're really at or where they excel. And there are people who have like been building business models forever. For them, like that part of things is like super simple, but they've maybe never been exposed to sort of the legal side of things. So I think it's just setting expectations at the beginning is like, look, there's some parts of this program you're going to excel at, and that's fine. But there's parts where you're going to be exposed to like, okay, I need to work on this. And this is why we also do the personal development side of things. So we have coaches who come along and speak to people, like give feedback on like how they've done a negotiation. Because sometimes, you might sit there and have a conversation, but no one's ever going to tell you and go, do you know what? Like your body language told us this during that negotiation. Like that kind of development just isn't accessible to people, and that kind of feedback. So I think just going back to your question, like setting the expectations of like not everyone in the room is the same as you, and that's a good thing.
Right.
And utilizing that skill set from other people in the room, that's where you're going to be most powerful.
You've transferred industries quite a lot. Do you have any advice for those that may be trying to break in from a non-traditional background, so trying to go into tech, VC, looking to go to a Palantir kind of thing, like something that's a bit outside their current wheelhouse?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I do sometimes wonder how on earth I ended up on this career path. I think if you know what you're good at, I think we'd going back to what we talked about earlier on, like be a nice person, like whatever you do. Whether you're working with suppliers or vendors or like people, just be a really nice person, because that will come back and bite you if not. And then if you're looking at transitioning skill sets wise, like unfortunately, like although I was headhunted for a couple of roles, I do think it's who you know, which really can help you move around. Yeah. And I think building a strong set of supporters, so you might have, and I've met one of them today, but like my personal board members, these are friends or like people in my life who have continually like been those people I could call if I need to. And he's an ex-Palantirian, but we've traveled.
Palantirian?
Yeah.
Is that...
I knew you'd pick it.
Why?
Oh, it's just always just interesting.
You're a Newtoner now.
I am a Newtoner.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting to see, like, that's part of culture as well.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah. And so, we used to be called hobbits, but I won't get into that. So
that's something I want to get into. But not hobbits.
Yeah.
I guess
high limit on who can work there, I guess.
Yeah. But I guess obviously this is part of the program as well. But it'd be great to hear from you in terms of build what makes a great networker. Obviously, you talk about this transactional nature that some individuals might have. But, especially if someone that might be lower in the totem pole, you want access to people that are a bit higher, right? What's the advice you might give to someone starting out?
That's a really good show. I mean, we could use you and I as an example, Ken. Like, we met because of a business like thing. You happened to come along and do our program. But, when we were walking, we bumped into each other towards something. And I said, let's have a coffee.
Yeah.
And we grabbed a coffee and then we carried on chatting when we got to the school, like the business school, and we built up a rapport, and then it grows from there. And I said, come into the office, let's have a chat. And like I think there's just an element of just being open to having conversations with people in like, and be opportunist. What's the word?
Opportunistic.
Yeah, because nothing's ever gonna, like, if I said to you, hey, let's let's schedule a 30-minute chat.
No.
It's just not priority for anyone. Like, not that you're not a priority of mine, Ken,
No,
but
I know
like,
what you mean. Yeah.
I think being a good networker is taking advantage of like those situations where you just like, take advantage of being in the same room as someone, or like bumping into somebody, or like, I think that transactional side of things is really difficult not to, because essentially you do sometimes need to ask for something, an intro, or like a connection, or like some advice, but if you can go in with the attitude of like no agenda to start with, I think that's where you're going to build the stronger network. Because I think about it like, my LinkedIn is stupid now. Like, people think I'm a VC, so I get founders sending me stuff all the time, and I quite frankly like went in to Newton going, right, I'm not going to add anyone I don't know. I want to have a quality like connections list, and now I've got like a stupid amount that it's just embarrassing now. But that's not my real network. My real network are the people that I actively like engage with and know beyond like their business life. And in fact, like, I went to an event recently, a legal firm, and you know, I met someone in the lift, and I was like, tell me something that's not like work related, and he couldn't get it. He felt really like, no, I'm just from the X family office, and I was like, great. Like, I'm so bored with just starting everything with, and especially in the VC land, it's like, what's your ticket size? What sector? What
firm are you at?
Yeah. And I think it minimizes people. Like, people are so much more than their work. And I think from my experience, getting to know people beyond like what they do for a living, or what they do to like fund their lifestyle out of it, is far more impactful and far more authentic, and builds quality connections beyond like work.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I agree. I think if you can, sorry, but it's just reflecting on the drinks we were at last night. Like, it's almost like people overcomplicate it. So you're at an event, like 10% of people will just sort of don't have it in them to just go over and start a conversation. 10 to 20% are just staying within their friend group and not, we came from Goldman, so we're just going to stay in our little Goldman group in the corner. So like, you're already ahead of most people if you can just go and talk.
Yeah.
And just talk without an agenda, because then you'll just naturally, like, you'll gravitate to some sort of common ground, build some rapport, and then sure enough, at some point in the conversation, I'll be, oh, actually, yeah, I know someone who works at, XP firm or whatever, and that might be the firm you happen to want an intro to.
I do wish the ending of those conversations didn't end with let's add each other on LinkedIn, though.
Yeah, that's
I don't know what the solution is, but it's just.
Well, someone last night asked me for my business card, and I'm like,
oh, that's cute.
No, I was like, yeah. So maybe like I think it's better than the business card to have the LinkedIn, but yeah, I mean, because then you want to give someone your WhatsApp, like email, just kind of bit like, because you also don't know, like some people are kind of freakazoids, so you don't know if like. And
they are, because I get like, and it's hard because at least LinkedIn, I have a barrier between people who are like not cool. I'm not going to use your term, but like it's. I think it's really difficult. I'd say 99% of people I meet are really lovely, and like I'm really happy to connect with them. But I think really consider your approach when you go to networking events, and like, or even any event. What is it you want out of this?
Yeah.
And like, building a strong network of people who. Like I said, like I could just reach out to 100 people, I reckon, who would actually go over and above to help me out, which is powerful in itself. And those are not people that I've met, like they're not friends. These are people I've met through, well, they might be friends now, I guess. Frenemies.
Yeah, not friends, but enemies, in fact.
Yeah. No, they're like people who I have built a really good, strong relationship with. And I'll have dinner with them, and that's really nice.
Yeah. The amount of times it's just lunches and coffees and just catching up with people. I mean, because even now at events, like, I have a hard time spending more than 5 minutes talking to someone, because then you have to, I need to catch up with this person, and this.
Yeah.
But it's fun after a while.
Yeah. Let's compose ourselves for the end. Yeah.
That's that. No. Thank you very much, Eleanor, for coming on. Ken, it's good to see you. I saw you yesterday. I don't want to see you tomorrow. It's too much. But thank you very much. No, that's a great episode. And next week we've got Hector coming on, who's going to give us a breakdown of life during IB and life after. He's quit now, so he's going to tell us all about what it's like to actually have free time for a change, which will be quite interesting.
You know what?
This week they're not liking and subscribe. Don't like, don't subscribe, don't comment.